Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salalo Makudira. The time is 9:38, and we're in the second hour of the show, and we're going to be kicking this part of the show, I think, with a very, very important conversation. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa met with U.S. President Donald Trump in the White House last week. I think we all saw that meeting, and yeah, it was aimed at cooling tensions and resuscitating or resurrecting a frayed diplomatic relationship between the two countries. And this comes after months of visible absences. The US, had been boycotting G20 related meetings hosted by South Africa in what I think we can all agree was a proverbial political cold shoulder. But now, with G20 leaders summit set for November in Johannesburg, it has been reported that Trump has agreed to attend. I remember quite clearly, I think at that Oval Office meeting, one of the journalists asked if indeed he'll be joining and attending the G20 summit here in South Africa. And he boldly said the G20 is nothing without the United States of America. So yeah, we'll be unpacking that. This comes in the aftermath of President Ramaphosa's what he called a success, that meeting between him and Trump, brushing off talks of genocide claims and diplomatic discord as misinformation driven by French groups here in South Africa. But beneath the smiles and some of the photo ops lies a much deeper conversation. What did that very moment mean for South Africa's global standing? And how should Africa navigate high stakes chessboard of global powers jockeying for influence? And joining us now to unpack this is Raymond Matlala, Executive Chairman of the South African BRICS Youth Association, a voice that's deeply engaged in the intersection between multilateralism, youth leadership, and African urgency in global governance. Raymond, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you giving us your time this morning on Salam Media.
Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to the listeners.
Yeah, morning. I think first and foremost we can kickstart with your general reaction between South Africa and the United States of America, the diplomatic ties that have seemingly been severed. Others saying, well, that meeting last week might have saved them, and this reported U-turn on the attendance of Donald Trump to the G20 summit later on this year.
Yeah, look, I think the government has done exceptionally well in terms of mending the relationship, particularly the diplomatic relationship with the U.S. I mean, South Africa is that country that always, serves as human rights, civil rights, as well as peace. So we don't like to cause fights or chaos, but essentially, if that relationship has been mended, that's good, not only diplomatically but also with regards to trade as well as other particular interested sectors that we trade with the U.S. on them. And the attendance, I mean, it will be good to have the U.S. particularly because the handover is going to be handed over to the United States. I do think that it is not, I mean, the G20 is not nothing without the U.S., but it's also one of the member states that also plays a critical role, similar to other member states. But this year for South Africa, it's particularly because South Africa has to hand over the presidency to the United States. So if they are not there, who are they going to be handing over the presidency to? And maybe that's a discussion that the heads of states will have as they engage, whether there's then, the handover goes to the US, would go to another country, which will then replace the US in terms of hosting the G20 next year, 2026.
We all heard Donald Trump saying the G20 is nothing without the USA. I think he was answering a question fielded by one of the reporters there. What does that say about America's general approach to to multilateralism, and how should South Africa and maybe the global South respond to this kind of rhetoric?
Look, if this iteration was a decade ago, I would say yes, but not at this not at this current juncture in terms of where the geopolitics are. I think many of us know that the U.S. is losing respect, in particular in the multilateralism, particularly on their policies and the stance that they take against other countries. Um, but yeah, I don't think the US. I mean, the G20 is nothing without the US. Even if the US can pull out, I mean, if you look at, let's take an example with just the BRICS member states that are in the G20 alone. I mean, they surpass the economy of the G7, which the US is part of.
Mm,
As well as the GDP. So you can really tell. There is something. If it was a decade ago, maybe I would probably agree with that sentiment, but not now. Yes, it's a big player in the global stage, but it's no longer that superpower. We've got China. We've got your Russia. We've got other emerging countries that are coming up.
mm,
So
mm.
for me, that iteration really it does not hold water, or rather, it's not factual in my take.
Mm, mm, mm. There's one thing which has been really, really interesting for me. South Africa's um, leaning. If I can put it, it's been a contention of debate in many circles. Some questioning, us leaning towards the east and our BRICS membership status. Some saying, well, that represents an alternative. Others saying, well, traditionally, some of our biggest trading partners are those in the west. Is South Africa in danger of being used as a geopolitical bridge between competing world blocs? Or can we use this moment as a country to truly amplify a Pan African voice that can benefit? It doesn't matter which bloc we're dealing with, whether it's the East or the West, but ultimately a broader Pan African voice that can speak on behalf of Africa and make sure that, well, Africa is taken seriously and is benefiting from some of the engagements that we have with these countries.
Yeah, look, I mean, maybe let me start with Pan African voice. I mean, South Africa has been the champion of that in multilateralism, particularly because it was the only country before the AU joined as a permanent member in Africa that sits in G20, and also before the expansion in 2023 of BRICS. South Africa was the only country that sits there. So in terms of that Pan African voice, I think South Africa was being was trying its best, rather, to say. The issue with Pan African voice is tricky because Africa is not yet united, and I think it's something that we need to work on to speak with one voice. I mean, Africa is very powerful if we speak in one voice, but because we're not yet taken as one, so we still have those gaps. So, but I think what South Africa can do rather is, and that has been our the South African foreign policy, talks to obviously SADC, Africa as a continent, and then BRICS, the global South. So, and global South, particularly in the voices of BRICS, South Africa has always been said is that we're not necessarily looking for alternatives, right?
Mm,
We're looking for so what we're trying to do is to work with everyone in different blocks. Whichever opportunity that comes, we will grab that opportunity. But what has been the case is historically the West opportunities came with certain conditions, and those conditions did not favor domestic policies, or whatever the case might be. Take, for example, this issue with the reducing of the amendment of the B Act, to allow some of the companies to still get in without or having to comply with the 30% BEE ownership. There will always be condition that comes with the West. But if you look at other blocks or groupings, there's no condition. So as South Africa, we just need to take advantage of that and see how do we capitalize on that and utilize that to our own benefit. That then will contribute significantly to Africa directly, in a sense of trade and all of those other engagements.
Lastly, before I let you go, Raymond, if you were advising President Ramaphosa ahead of the G20 summit in November, what key message or demand would you insist South Africa and Africa more broadly table at this global gathering?
Look, for me, to how do we address a African debt that is ballooning? How do we free Africa from this multilateral financial institutions and let Africa focus on its development? So it's can we talk about the African debt reduction, African debt waivers, and all of those things? So that would be my advice that I would give to President Ramaphosa when he goes to the G20 on something that he needs to achieve.
All right. I think we're going to leave it on that note, Raymond. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you so much.
There was an executive chairman of South African BRICS Youth Association, Raymond Matlala, who's weighing in on what is looking like a U-turn from Donald Trump. There were rumors, Marco that was tabled about whether or not South Africa will be joining. Whether the United States of America will be joining some other heads of states when it comes to the G20 summit, which South Africa is hosting later on in the year in November, if I'm not mistaken. And Trump said, well, the G20 is nothing without the USA. And Raymond there says, well, if it was 20 years ago, then maybe yes, but not anymore. What do you think? Do you think it's important that we have Donald Trump there? Do you think it's important that we have the United States of America participating and engaging in the G20 summit? They are the incoming president. South Africa is now the chair of the G20 summit, but the next one is the United States of America, and there needs to be an official handover from South Africa to the United States. And one can only imagine what that would look like if he doesn't attend. I think President Ramaphosa alluded to it in the Oval Office while they were engaging with Donald Trump. It's like, if you're not there, then who am I going to hand over the presidency to? And I think maybe we might have persuaded him. Maybe that meeting might have had an impact. But again, it might be the United States of America realizing that they can be isolated, in the world. They no longer wield as much influence as they used to. There are talks of de-dollarization by many countries across the world. And if they continue to be this inward looking, the influence that they carry in the world could slowly diminish. And it's by attending summits like the G20 summit, where you show your presence and you become part of the conversation alongside other heads of states, that you continue to wield that influence. You continue to be in the know about what's being discussed and, throw in your 2 cents. And I think it's more about that than, President Ramaphosa maybe changing Donald Trump's mind. I think it's them understanding that they might be isolated in the world's political engagements. So yeah, Are you happy that the United States of America is going to be attending the G20? Some believe that it'll be legitimizing the summit because others argue that it doesn't really hold any water without the world's biggest economy and one of the most influential countries of the 21st century, the United States of America, being there. Or you think it's business as usual, and actually that's where the world is supposed to be, the direction that it should be taking, considering some of the decisions that have been made by the United States of America in recent times. You can engage with us on our various social media pages. You can give us a call on 0116800355. That's our studio line, and our WhatsApp line is 0617660355. Are you excited? Are you happy that Donald Trump might be making his way to our shores right here in Jersey later on in November? We're going to take a quick break. News and views continues after this.